want you to take a second and mentally scroll through your Spotify Wrapped.
Oh boy.
Yeah, or maybe look at that dusty guitar sitting in the corner of your room. Or even think about that time you tried to learn a magic trick just to impress someone at a bar.
We have all been there.
We really have. And on the surface, we call these things hobbies, we call it culture. But if you look at them through a cold, hard, evolutionary lens, they make absolutely no sense.
Right. They're basically caloric black holes.
Exactly. You spend thousands of hours mastering a really complex riff or learning how to read micro expressions on someone's face, and that energy doesn't build you a shelter.
No.
It doesn't help you fight off a bear. In the wild, wasting that much precious energy on something that doesn't keep you alive should literally kill you.
Right.
It is objectively a terrible survival strategy.
Yeah, it really is.
So, the mission for this deep dive today is to figure out why we do it. We've got this whole stack of sources, from classic Charles Darwin all the way to modern psychological studies, and we're going back to basics. Why do we possess this drive to perform?
It's the ultimate question of evolutionary aesthetics, really. And the answer might just change how you look at the next concert you go to, or even your next date. Because the sources we've pulled, they suggest that these aren't just hobbies.
Right.
They are what we call high-definition presence strategies.
Okay, high-definition presence. That sounds like, I don't know, a marketing term for a new TV. But I have a feeling we're talking about something much more biological here.
Much more biological. It's essentially a mechanism for hacking the human mating market. We're going to explore this theory that complex musicality and what we'll call mentalism.
Like psychological illusions.
Exactly. Psychological illusions and high-level empathy.
Yeah.
That these are actually sophisticated biological billboards. They're advertising genetic wealth in a way that is almost impossible to fake.
So essentially we're talking about the peacock's tail theory, but applied to the human brain.
Precisely. Darwin originally laid this out in The Descent of Man. He called it sexual selection.
Right, distinguishing it from natural selection.
Exactly. You notice that animals often have these traits that are actually detrimental to survival, but they're absolutely essential for reproduction. Think of birdsong or the peacock's tail. But modern biology has a more specific and frankly more ruthless term for it.
Which is?
The handicap principle.
Okay. This is Ahmad Zahavi's concept, right? I was reading about this in the source material. The idea that for a signal to be honest, it has to be expensive.
Spot on. Think about it this way. If a signal is cheap, anyone can fake it. If I walk up to you and just say, hey, I'm incredibly strong.
Right, that's just cheap talk.
It costs me 0 calories to say that. You have 0 reason to believe me. But if I walk up to you carrying a 500-pound boulder,
then I'm paying attention.
That is an honest signal. It is physically impossible to fake without the underlying capacity.
And the peacock's tail is the classic example of this. Because it's heavy, it's bright, it makes it way harder to fly.
It's a nightmare for camouflage.
Yeah. It basically acts as a giant neon sign for tigers saying, eat me. It is a massive liability.
Which is exactly why it works for mating. The peacock is effectively saying to the peahen, look at me. I am so genetically robust, I have so much surplus energy and resources that I can drag this massive liability around and still survive. He's proving he has resources to burn. Only an individual with surplus bandwidth can afford those displays.
Okay, I get the bird. I totally get the boulder. But how do we get from a bird's tail to, say, a jazz musician? Because playing a guitar solo doesn't seem like a liability or a handicap in the same way. I mean, it's not going to get you eaten by a tiger.
Well, it won't get you eaten, but it is metabolically incredibly expensive. And this brings us to a really key technical metric in our sources.
Okay.
Low mutation load.
Low mutation load. That sounds very clinical, not particularly romantic.
No, it's not.
Imagine going up to someone and saying, hey, I love you because of your low mutational load.
Yeah, it lacks a certain poetry, sure.
Oh.
But it is the engine of attraction underneath it all.
Right.
Here is the breakdown. Every single time your cells divide, there's a tiny chance for a typo in your DNA.
Right, mutations.
Exactly, these are mutations. Now, most of them are harmless. But if you accumulate too many, what we call a high mutational load biological systems, start to degrade.
Okay, so where does the brain come in?
The brain is the most complex system we have. It's the most energy-hungry, intricate organ in the human body. It consumes about 20% of your metabolic energy just sitting there.
Wow, 20%.
Yeah. So because it's so complex, it acts as the canary in the coal mine for your DNA. If you have genetic errors, they are going to show up in the brain first.
Oh, I see. So if I'm understanding this right, the brain is basically a stress test.
It's a continuous neurological stress test. To improvise a complex piece of music, let's stick with the jazz solo example, you need massive working memory just to know where you are in the chord structure.
Right.
You need incredibly fine motor control to hit the strings perfectly. You need executive function to plan the next note while you're currently playing the present one. And you have to do all of this in milliseconds.
So if your system is like glitchy because of a high mutational load, you just can't pull that off.
You crash, you lose the rhythm, you hit a wrong note. So when you see someone performing a high-level creative acts effortlessly, they are advertising their metabolic rate efficiency.
Just showing off their wiring.
Exactly. They are signaling, my neural wiring is so pristine, my error rate is so low, that I can afford to burn precious energy on this completely useless, beautiful complexity.
It's an ornamental mind. I think that was the phrase from the packet.
That is the exact phrase the researchers use. Just like the tail is a physical ornament, complex creativity is a cognitive ornament. It's a pure display of surplus bandwidth.
That puts a fascinating, almost ironic spin on the whole tortured artist stereotype.
How so?
Well, we usually think of artists as fragile or maybe emotionally unstable, but you're saying the act of creation itself is actually a signal of robust, elite genetic health.
Paradoxically, yes. Behavior fundamentally says I am healthy enough to waste time on beauty.
That is wild. But let's play devil's advocate here for a second, because I've been to plenty of concerts where the musician is technically incredible. They're playing a million notes a second.
Right, shredding.
Yeah, clearly passing that stress test with flying colors. But the audience is just bored stiff. You look around and people are checking their phones, so it can't just be about demonstrating efficiency. There has to be some kind of emotional component that actually hooks the other person.
You are absolutely right. Efficiency is just the signal. But we need to talk about the mechanism of attraction. How does that signal actually hack the observer's brain?
Right.
This is where the biology shifts into psychology, specifically a concept called excitation transfer.
Okay, I remember reading about this in the Zillman and Bryant studies from the source stack. This is the idea that the brain is surprisingly bad at labeling where its feelings are coming from.
It is notoriously bad at it.
Yeah.
We really like to think we are logical creatures. But our physiological arousal system, the sympathetic nervous system, is very blunt.
It just turns on or off.
Pretty much. It deals in raw states. So we're talking increased heart rate, sweaty palms, dilated pupils, heightened alertness.
So if I just finished a sprint, or say if I'm listening to really intense high BPM music, my body is in a state of high arousal.
Correct. And arousal is ambiguous. It's just raw energy. Now imagine you are in that state because of the music, and then you look at the person standing in front of you, or maybe the person up on stage.
Okay.
Your brain, being an absolute efficiency machine, tries to connect the dots. It misattributes that residual arousal from the environment to the person.
It says my heart is racing and I'm looking at this drummer.
Therefore, I must be incredibly attracted to this drummer.
Exactly. It just relabels excitement as attraction.
Yes.
Now, is there actual data backing this up? Because it sounds a bit like a magic trick, like a love potion or something.
There is very robust data. There was a pivotal study by Morena and colleagues back in 2017 that tested this explicitly.
Okay, let's unpack that one. What did they do?
They took a group of women and exposed them to highly complex, high arousal music. Then immediately after listening to the music, they asked them to rate the attractiveness of a series of male faces.
And they compared this to a control group.
Yes, a group that rated the exact same male faces, but after sitting in complete silence.
And what happened?
The results were highly significant. The women who listened to the complex music rated the exact same faces as much more attractive. And crucially, they showed a higher willingness to actually date those men compared to the silence group.
That is powerful. The music essentially acted as like audio goggles.
Audio goggles is a great way to put it. You are priming the canvas with the other person's mind. But here is where it gets nuanced, and the sources make a very key distinction here. They found a gender discrepancy.
Really?
Yeah. This excitation transfer effect was found strongly in women rating men, but it was much weaker, or sometimes completely non-existent the other way around, for men rating women.
Okay, which actually aligns perfectly with the Darwinian model we talked about earlier, right? Where females are typically the choosier sex regarding these genetic displays.
It does. It suggests that women are biologically tuned to listen for these specific signals of cognitive complexity in potential mates.
Fascinating.
And there's another layer to this that the sources really emphasize. the difference between a recording and live performance.
Right, because listening to Spotify is totally passive. You're just pressing play. Being there in the room is different.
It's completely different because of something called dominance over chaos.
Oh, I like that phrase.
When you watch someone improvise live, you are watching them navigate risk in real time. They are taking a chaotic situation, unknown notes, the potential for failure, the immense pressure of the crowd, and they are actively imposing structure on it.
So it's a leadership signal.
Exactly. The listener feels the tension. Will they pull this off? Are they going to mess up? And when they do pull it off, that relief and thrill gets directly transferred to the performer. You aren't just hearing the music. You're witnessing their absolute competence in handling volatility.
Man, that is so interesting. Now, this brings us to one of the most controversial, or at least for me, the most surprising parts of the research packet.
The ovulatory shift.
Yes, the ovulatory shift. This suggests that our taste in this kind of complexity isn't even static. It actually changes based on the fertility cycle.
This is where the evolutionary logic is really ruthless. We have to look at the study by Charlton here. They found that women at peak fertility, so the specific window where conception is biologically possible, showed a massive spike in preference for creators of complex music.
But there was a very specific condition attached to that preference in the study, wasn't there?
Yes, there was. The preference was specifically for short-term sexual partners. Flings.
Okay, let's break down the trade-off here, because this is fascinating. Why do you want the complex jazz shredder for a fling, but maybe not for a husband?
It comes right back to the classic evolutionary trade-off, good genes versus good dad.
Right.
Complexity, that high-risk, high-skill musical improvisation we've been talking about, signals high testosterone, high cognitive functioning, and top-tier genetic quality. But biologically speaking, high testosterone and extreme risk-taking often correlate with lower parental investment.
It's the literal bad boy trope.
Exactly.
The guy who is absolutely amazing on stage, pouring his soul out, but completely forgets to pick up the kids from school.
It's a stereotype because it's rooted in a biological pattern. Evolutionarily, the guy who is completely obsessed with mastering a complex, practically useless skill might be a fantastic genetic bet.
Yeah.
He gives your offspring that high-quality, low-mutation, low DNA.
Yeah.
But he might not be the guy who actually sticks around to help raise the offspring.
So when fertility is at its peak, the biological priority just overrides everything and shifts to get the best genes possible right now.
Correct. Complexity acts as a hurdle. Only the highest quality genes can clear the hurdle of creating unpredictable but coherent music.
That for a long-term partner,
That volatility suddenly becomes a massive risk. For a long-term partner, you might naturally prefer someone with simpler, more predictable displays, because those signal stability, provisioning, and reliability.
yeah, it is just uncomfortably pragmatic.
Nature usually is. It's always hedging its bets.
All right, so we've covered the auditory signal, right? The music. Let's pivot to the other half of our episode's title, mentalism.
Yes.
And to be super clear for you listening, we are not talking about pulling rabbits out of hats.
No.
We're not talking about simple sleight of hand you buy at a joke shop or a David Copperfield special.
Definitely not.
Okay.
In this specific context, when we say mentalism, we are referring to high-definition social cognition.
Okay, define that for us.
It's the performance of hyperempathy. It is demonstrating that you can track the internal state of another human being better than they can even track it themselves.
Okay, the sources link this back to the mind-reading mums hypothesis. Can you unpack that connection a bit?
Sure. So the mind-reading mums hypothesis suggests that the human ability to infer mental states, what evolutionary psychologists call theory of mind, originally evolved just to keep infants alive.
Oh, because babies can't talk.
Exactly. A mother needs to know exactly what a pre-verbal baby wants just by looking at the tiny shifts in their face or hearing the slight difference in the tone of their cry.
Is it a hungry cry or a tired cry?
Right, so reading minds is basically a foundational survival mechanism for parenting.
But how does that jump from keeping a baby alive to flirting at a cocktail party?
Well, in the mating market, this exact same skill gets weaponized. If music creates a broad environmental arousal like filling the whole room with energy mentalism, a laser-guided missile, it creates very surgical intimacy.
It's the difference between broadcasting to a whole stadium versus whispering something right in someone's ear.
Ideally, yes. The techniques mentioned in the sources, things like clean language echoing or personalized supportive reads, these are effectively high-level demonstrations of Machiavellian intelligence.
Okay, right. Machiavellian usually has a really negative connotation, like you're manipulative or a sociopath.
I know, but in biology, it doesn't mean evil.
Right.
It just means socially adept. It means you possess the cognitive horsepower to successfully navigate complex social hierarchies. Think about what a cold read actually is in practice.
Okay.
You look at someone, you observe tiny, almost invisible details in their posture, the way their clothes hang, their micro-expressions, things they don't even know they are broadcasting to the room.
Right.
And then you synthesize all of that data instantly and make an accurate, intuitive statement about their internal private world.
We're telling them something about themselves that they genuinely felt was private.
Yes. And when you get it right, it triggers a massive release of oxytocin and dopamine in the listener's brain. It creates this profound, instant sensation of being truly seen.
Wow. So if the musician is up there signaling, hey, I have a healthy brain, the mentalist is right next to you signaling, I have a socially dominant brain.
Exactly. They are saying, I have the surplus bandwidth to pay attention to you better than anyone else here.
And that is a potent mating signal.
Incredibly potent. In the short term, it creates that urgency, that mystical, oh my God, we have deep connection feeling. Salespeople call it the empathy close.
Okay, but what about long term? Because we just talked about how complex music drops off as a preference for long-term partners. Does mentalism suffer the same fate?
Actually, no. This one holds up much better.
Really?
Yeah, because it signals that you will be an attentive partner. If you can read my mind during a first date, the biological assumption is that you can read my needs in a 10-year relationship without me having to explicitly spell them out every time.
It drastically reduces the friction of communication.
Exactly. It's a promise of low-maintenance understanding. I will understand you effortlessly. That is a massive value proposition for long-term survival and childhood.
That makes total sense. Okay, let's land this plane. We got the theory. We know we need to be these peacocks with highly efficient brains and high empathy.
Right.
But the sources actually gave us some surprisingly specific, actionable data on how to apply this. If you're listening right now and wanting to cultivate this high-definition presence we've been talking about, what do you actually do?
Well, first, we need to completely debunk a myth. You see this all over the internet right now. The idea that 528 hertz is the love frequency or a healing vibration.
Oh yeah, I see that on YouTube all the time.
Yep.
Listen to the specific tone to attract your soulmate.
That's absolute pseudoscience. Biology does not care about specific frequencies in some mystical, cosmic sense. It cares about tempo. It cares about entrainment.
So what is the actual sweet spot, according to the hard data?
The research clearly points to the 110 to a 119 BPM range.
Beats per minute? Why that really specific window?
Because it perfectly matches the human heart rate during states of physical excitement or mild exertion. If you play music below 90 BPM, you are physically sedating the listener.
Which is probably great for cuddling, but bad for sparking that initial fiery attraction.
Right, exactly. And if you go above 130 BPM, getting into high-tempo techno or speed metal, you start triggering agitation and stress response.
It becomes a workout, not a seduction.
Yes. But 110 to 119, that entrains the listener's heart to a state of readiness. It physically mimics the physiological feeling of falling in love.
You're literally hacking their physiology to match the state you want them to be
You are setting the pace of their body.
in. Wow.
And the genre matters too, by the way. The study by Lee and Zariab showed that for men rating women, groove and rhythmic capacity are huge predictors of sexual attraction.
Because rhythm signals reproductive health.
It's physical coordination. But for women rating men, we go right back to that complexity metric. Rock, jazz fusion, really intricate electronic music. Genres that display what the sources call controlled volatility.
Controlled volatility. That is really the synthesis of this entire deep dive, isn't it?
It is the ultimate strategy. The sources suggest that the most effective display isn't just constant, overwhelming noise or constant, intense mind reading. It's the ability to spike arousal, hit that impossibly high note, make that shocking, accurate observation, and then stabilize it.
You create the tension, and then you show you can handle the tension.
Yes. If you're just chaotic all the time, you look unstable. You're a high risk.
Right.
But if you're just calm all the time, you look boring. Low reward. High-definition presence is the ability to toggle seamlessly between the two. You spike the dopamine, and then you offer the safety.
That dynamic range is what proves you have the surplus bandwidth. You are the absolute master of your own arousal system.
And by extension, you demonstrate that you can handle theirs.
That is such a crucial takeaway. It's not about just being the loud peacock shaking its feathers everywhere. It's about being the controlled peacock.
Precisely.
So just to recap all of this for you listening, Musicality and mentalism are ancient evolutionary billboards. They broadcast, my genes are healthy, my brain is incredibly efficient, and I have enough surplus energy to master this useless, beautiful thing.
And they work by hijacking our very blunt arousal systems. Music creates the broad physiological fire and social cognition that mentalism directs that fire into personalized intimacy.
So if you are looking to apply this out in the real world, forget the magic YouTube frequencies.
Please do.
Focus on the tempo, keep it in that 110 to 119 sweet spot, and above all, remember, controlled volatility.
Create the storm, then be the calm center of it. That is the ultimate dominance display.
You know, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We spent this whole time talking about the display, right? The noise, the complexity, the signaling, all that action.
Yeah.
But I think the most powerful part of the controlled volatility concept is actually the silence.
The silence.
Yeah, consider this. The ultimate display of confidence isn't just the ability to make the noise, it's the ability to stop.
Oh, wow.
To spike that intensity, to play the complex riff, or make the incredibly deep observation, and then just hold the silence without rushing nervously to fill it.
That is a great point. Holding silence requires massive confidence. It proves you aren't anxious.
Exactly.
It proves you have the bandwidth to just sit in the tension you just created. That is often where the real connection happens.
So the next time you're out, look for the peacocks. But pay special attention to the ones who know exactly when to fold the tail and just look at you. Thanks for diving in with us.
Always a pleasure.